Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation with authors. Today, we're taking a little bit of a field trip and we're reaching out to some of our associate members, and we're talking today with Marsali Taylor, a CWC member from Shetland. Marsali is a retired teacher who now seems to spend most of her time either sailing or writing. She writes more than just mysteries, but will focus on her 11 Shetland Sailing Mysteries. Hi, Marsali, how are you today?
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we were just saying off screen, you're so far away that I'm about to prepare lunch and you're doing dinner. But there's a pretty big time difference between us, but I'm glad we were able to work this out today.
Yes, I think when I flew back from Canada, I actually arrived before I'd left, which was a wonderful trick.
Yeah, if you leave at the wrong time, though, you can get like the sun for like the entire time, like just coming up. So I didn't do it myself, but I had a relative who did it and said like I couldn't get any rest because the sun was just glaring all the time. It's brilliant and then annoying after 8 hours. Well, let's start with setting. Can you tell us a little bit about Shetland?
Now then, Shetland, when I came here, I knew where it was, but I thought it was closer to Scotland than it was because that's where it's always in the map. And I didn't realize that I was actually going to Viking territory. It's far more Norwegian than it is Scottish because the Vikings got here round about 700, 720 and colonized the place. So all the place names are Viking, things like STGA and Svartateng. The dialect, which comes up often in books, is also very strongly accented with the Norse. And in fact, older folk who speak very broad Shetland say that they can make themselves understood no bother in Norway. Just the Shetland Norwegian links are so strong. Everywhere you go, it used to be that all the houses were old-fashioned croft houses, which were basically Viking longhouses, probably on a Viking site, because if you've taken the bother to clear a site, then you just keep building your house on top of it. And now the new houses are all what we call kit houses. They're wooden Norwegian houses painted blue and navy. We have our own Shetland flag, which is the Scottish colours, but with the Dannebrog cross, the slightly offset cross. The boats, which are all around us, everybody has a boat. You can tell that fall is coming when boats start appearing in gardens, and then spring is now when the boats are all going back to the marina. And the traditional boats are double-ended boats with a single square sail that you hoist up the mast, basically straight Viking boats.
When I was doing my research on Shetland too, I saw puffins.
Yes,
like, oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah, we have wonderful seabirds. I spent the last couple of years, every time I went out for a sail, I started counting birds because I had the impression that there had been almost none for a bit and then they were gradually coming back. So I was astonished at the number of species I could see just sailing maybe 3-4 miles from the house. So we had puffins, we had razorbills, we had guillemots, and not only different species, but you'd see what I reckon was the same birds in their own little 100-meter patch of water. Like there was one group of 12, which was 3 or 4 razorbills and 3 or 4 guillemots and some younger ones. And they just appeared at the same place almost every time. And it was very funny too, the different reactions to me sailing towards them. I mean, not deliberately, but they were in my way and I was sailing. And the puffins saw, no, what were we going to do? What were we going to do? And dive under at the last minute. And the razorbills just went, oh, her again. And once I was out when the guillemot chicks had just come down. It's the father who looks after the guillemot chicks, and he kind of coaxes them to follow him jumping off the cliff. And so there was this number of older guillemots with all these little ones in the middle. And of course, they were totally panicked by the idea of this large white thing bearing down sort of fairly near them. And the adults were obviously going, yeah, harmless. She's all out.
I've spoken to many authors about the importance of setting. It's a conversation I have repeatedly, but I don't think I've ever met an author whose setting was so important that they put the setting Shetland in the title 11 straight times. So obviously it's important to you, but why is it setting so important to you?
Well, in one way, it's an editorial choice, because when I got my second publisher, Alison Busby, then it was not long after the Shetland series had come on the TV first in Britain. And so they were, can I say, cashing in? But yes, they were thinking people who enjoyed Anne Cleeves might like to read these as another Shetland set book. But they do tend to have, I'm not very good at titles. 100,000 words, easy. 10 snappy words for a title is difficult. So they do, in my head, as I'm working on them, tend to get titles like Death on a Shetland Isle or Death in Shetland Waters. So it's a kind of continuation of that, and it saves me having to think of something clever. I wish I could. I look at other people's titles and go, I wish I'd thought of that. And it does make them look lovely, because they've now reissued all the original 5, which were out of print. And they've got the most gorgeous pictures on the front, and they really do look like a set. When you see them together in a bookshop, they stand out, which is lovely.
I'm the same as you. I've written my most recent book, and I'm really stuck on a title. It's harder than writing the book sometimes.
I think the other thing about Shetland is, of course, it's in many ways it's a wonderful place to set murders, because everybody knows everybody. You've got the Shetland Islands are bigger than people expect. They're 100 miles long roughly and 40 across, a sort of long, thin cross shape. But everybody knows everybody. There are only 22,000 people, which is probably, 3 streets of Vancouver if you're lucky. Or maybe only one, a couple of skyscrapers. And everybody knows everybody. They really do. And, everybody is their cousin. Or, so if my heroine Cass needs to know anything about a person, she just asks one of her friends. Her friend Maggie, who is a retired fishing skipper, grew up in Bray, knows everybody. And instantly I can give the reader all sorts of information without it sounding unnatural. Well, maybe it's unnatural to people who live in cities, but believe me, I've cut it short. I only let him go on about this man rather than his grandfather and his great-grandfather.
Oh, it's going to sound like Tolkien. In your description of this series, you say that each book's a standalone, but there's a slow-growing love story in your books. You're about to publish book number 11. So I'm assuming by now, Cass and Detective Inspector McRae are probably planning their wedding.
Gavin might quite like one. Cass's dad would absolutely love one, but a shotgun would be pointed at somebody, and I think it would be Cass rather than Gavin.
Okay, so it's an extremely slow moving.
You have actually mentioned, isn't it? Very, very slow moving. When I did the first few books, then my agent said to me, well, couldn't he say something nice to her at this point? I said, no, he's Scottish. And she's, well, maybe he could take her hand. And I said, no, he's Scottish. He would rather be boiled in oil than be seen doing public affection. We don't do that. But I think by the end of book 4, did they manage their first kiss? Somewhere about there.
Oh, okay.
No hurry.
So it's moving. It is moving.
Yeah, it is moving. Yes, it is. Cass has been persuaded to live on land, which is a major step, and I'm still not sure whether she's going to be able to take it.
Also, Cass, you have a very, let's say, unique theme going on with your books of the sailing theme.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever read a whole series. I know some authors have put their books on a cruise or something like that, but I don't know about a whole series. Obviously, this is a part of Shetland life. You've mentioned everybody has a boat, but is sailing such a prevalent part of all your books?
Some have more in it than others. Death in Shetland Waters is set completely on a Norwegian tall ship, the Sørlandet, which was a wonderful research job. I actually did that voyage, and as I think I say at the end, the trainees are all real people. The enlightened Kristiansand had decided that it would do their young people in difficulties, maybe people who'd lost a parent, or some were children who'd come as immigrants to, there was Ethiopian ones, I remember, and some Arabic guys. And so it was a crew of all the nations, but they'd taken 50 of these young people and put them on board a tall ship for a fortnight. And they absolutely loved it. Once they realized that they were being given almost carte blanche to climb up those three huge great masts. You know, I mean, for an adventurous teenager, a tall ship is a wonderful playground. And there was one particularly who gets a mention in the book, who was, I used to be a teacher, so I looked at this sea of young people with bags looking up at these masts. And one in particular, she wore a sort of big Bob Marley jacket and something like a British policewoman's hat with a checker band pulled right down over her eyes. And all you could see really in the middle was scowl. And I thought, we've got a sea lawyer here. She loved it. She absolutely loved it. Within a day, she was not only doing her own watch, because the ship work is divided into watch, she was joining in everybody else's. And they had such fun, and they were such fun to be with. I so enjoyed that voyage. So yes, sailing. Well, I've always messed about in boats. When I was young, we had the wonderful chance to go every summer for the whole 6 weeks of the school holidays to the West Highlands, to a cottage which had no running water. It has now, but it didn't then. No electricity, no phones, side of the road, which was itself the most dreadful pot-rutted, Highland cattle strewn 20 miles worth from the nearest village even. And we just went there and ran wild. My mum, my dad, my big sister, my wee brother, me and our Siamese cat, who also enjoyed it. He went for walks in the hills with us, and he came out in the boat with us. And the entire family now has this habit of upside downing rubber boots, Wellington boots, before they put them on, because he used to bring shoes and shrews, little bouncy mice, into the porch and lose them. And one of us once got bit when we put our foot on a shrew in our boot. But that was such fun. Of course, we had to be boat literate for there, because that was how we got about. So we all learned to handle a boat and wear a life jacket almost as soon as we could walk. And apparently the boat was my first playpen. Mum said if she wanted to keep me quiet for a bit, she put me in the boat with a book. And I was
you were born to write this series. One thing also that jumps out on the cover of your books is obviously the blurb from Anne Cleves. And obviously your passion for sailing has found its way into your books, because she says, this series is a must read for anyone who loves the sea or islands or joyous, intricate storytelling. What a beautiful blurb to say, but obviously, obviously your passion for sailing is definitely in your books.
Yes, well, I've shared it a bit with Anne as well, because when I first met her, then I was just starting out on my very first Shetland Mystery, which actually remains unpublished. I did 3, which didn't get a publisher. And she was actually up researching her first one, Raven Black, but she offered to do mentoring for anybody who was interested. So that's how I came to meet her. And I think it was at that point I took her out for a sail. And she loved it. So when she came back later, then she brought her grandson out as well. And at the moment, we're having such fun working out Shetland Noir, coming up with all sorts of ideas of things we have seen at other crime conferences and saying, we could do that, we could do that. And
so you're working with her, right?
Yes, yes. Well, she is the patron, and I think they've called me advisor.
You mentioned to me earlier too that you visited Canada a couple of times. You've been to Vancouver for Left Coast Crime, and you also visited Toronto for BoucherCon when it was here.
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you which one is your favorite of the two cities, because we're sort of rivals. So I'll spare you the diplomacy. But
thank you.
But obviously, you must have a tie or a like of Canada. So what has drawn you to here?
I've just always wanted to see Canada. And I'm not sure I could explain it, whether it was reading Anne of Green Gables when young, or, what's the book called? The Incredible Journey, about the dog and cat and 2 dogs and a cat that crossed wild Canada.
Oh.
Or whether I'd just seen photos, Sheila Burnett, I think. Or whether I'd just seen photos and thought, gosh, it looks like Loch Huron, my beloved West Coast. But I just always wanted to go there. And so when I got the chance to come to BoucherCon, I said firmly to my husband, it tends to be a little stay-at-home, I said, we're going to Canada, we're going to make a proper holiday of it. So we flew right over to Vancouver and had 3 or 4 days in Vancouver, splashed out on the most wonderful flat in an apartment looking right out over the harbour. And, you know, went out on a whale watching trip and were thorough tourists, walked around Gastown, had a wonderful time, just as everything was colouring up. And then I also wanted to see a bit of the wilderness, and we were so in between Vancouver and coming back to Toronto for BoucherCon, then we had 4 absolutely magical days in a place which was then called the Grizzly Bear Ranch. It's now called the Wild Bear Lodge. But the idea was that you'd just be taken through the Canadian wilderness by guides and hopefully see some bears, which we did. We had the most magical sighting of them. And they had log cabins, real log cabins, and the cooking was absolutely wonderful. So I went out every day and walked through this magical, magical countryside. And he stayed at home in his log cabin and composed music and didn't come out in case he met a bear. He's still wistful about it. It was a wonderful log cabin with a big stove that he probably used about half of the year's supply of wood in, and First Nation weaving on the walls. It was great. And then we came to Toronto and had fun there.
You mentioned that you like some of the ideas so much at those writers' festivals that you're sort of going to nick them for your own. And you were saying you met lots of Canadian authors, and some of them are going to come actually to Shetland Noir.
Yes, I'm absolutely delighted about this. The McNabb sisters are coming, so that's great with husbands. So they're going to stay on a bit afterwards. Lisa de Nicklitz also is coming. Marilee Robson, I think it's Canadian too. So, so it's really lovely. It's going to be so nice to see them again.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and you'll have to take them sailing, I guess.
Well, I would like to if they're able to stay long enough and if it's weather, because Shetland is really lovely from a boat. It's the road kind of goes round the back of houses, so when you're out in the water, suddenly everything feels as if it's the right way round.
Oh.
And you can be lucky. But one day last summer, I had an absolutely magical sail escorted by 2 dolphins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. So for the rest of us in Canada, though, I think we'll have to visit Shetland for now through your books.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I mentioned to you off screen, but you know, I have to say it to you on recording too. I absolutely love your website. You said you got a local firm to do it. You didn't do it yourself, but they did a brilliant job.
They did.
And if you don't mind, if I got I can't find it anymore. I had it up. You have a beautiful map.
Yes.
Of while I'm looking for it, maybe could you say your website?
Yes, it's www.marsaliTaylor.co.uk. Yeah, the map is because I have fun setting each of my books in a different part of Shetland, because different areas do different things. Like I had a Lewis Carroll moment, you know how Through the Looking Glass is based on a game of chess. Well, one island in Shetland, Fetlar, has revived the Viking game of Snaffle-Taffle, which is the chess equivalent. So Death on a Shetland Isle is actually a game of Snaffle-Taffle, and every section of the book has got 2 moves from each side on it. But of course, you don't the first time know who is on what side, except for Cass. You're fairly sure of her.
So if anybody wants to see your website, this beautiful map, it actually shows the location of each of your books and has the title or the book cover and tells us where you're visiting for that one, which is just a brilliant idea. So well done.
Yes, I wanted a map because the publishers don't usually do one, because they say, oh, that everybody just Googles it on their phone.
That's true too, but with the arrows pointing to the destination, I thought that was just a brilliant idea. So and then also on your website you have each of your books and pictures of the location on your book. So another brilliant idea. So kudos to you and your web designers for that one.
Thank you. Well, I will pass that on.
And to everyone watching, if you can't make it to Shetland anytime soon, I would highly advise pick up soon to be 11 books that seem to be a pleasure to read.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching today.
Thank you.